Welcome back, my dear followers, friends, or welcome if it's the first time that you are watching my YouTube channel, My Paranormal and Mystery TV. Do you want to know all the forbidden secrets, taboo secrets, untold secrets behind Interview with the Vampire, the film released in 1994. But first of all, before making you watch really incredible videos, you won't believe in your eyes. Many of you, I guess, that don't know that the real title of the movie, Interview with the Vampire, wasn't exact the real title, because the real title was Interview with the Vampire Chronicles, released in 1994, based on the novel by Annie Rice, directed by an incredible Neil Jordan, starring Tom Cruise, who played the role of Lestat. Think about that. Recently, Tom Cruise won the Oscar. And I was really shocked because I thought that Tom Cruise already won at least one Oscar. I was really shocked because Tom Cruise is one of my favorite actors ever. I watched all his movies and he deserved at least 20 Oscars. If I think about movies like Collateral, Born on the 4th of July, Jerry Maguire, Rayman, Legend, Far and Away, all the movies, the saga of Mission Impossible, Top Gun, and many other movies. I just can't believe that until now he didn't win even one Oscar. Fortunately, oh my God, recently he received the Oscar as, this is the exact, he received the Oscar at an honorary award for his career. And I'm really shocked that because if I think about The Last Samurai, all the movies, Eyes Wide Shut, really. Fortunately, he did the Oscar for, he won the Oscar for his career. Then we have Brad Pitt, who played the role of Louis. And Brad Pitt already has won 2 Oscars in his career. Brad Pitt was suffering very much in this movie for the conditions in which he found himself to play. It was unbearable, and in the videos there is the explanation about this deep suffering from Brad Pitt. Then we have Kirsten Dunst, who played the role of the little vampire Claudia. And think about that, when she played this so difficult role, she was only about 11, 12 years old. Oh my gosh! And she played the role of Claudia, the baby vampire who can't become an adult in an adult way. I think that absolutely she deserved the Oscar, as I think that Tom Cruise deserved the Oscar also in Interview with a Vampire, because he played Lestat in a more than extraordinary way. He deserved Oscar. And think about that when people, journalists, talk about Tom Cruise, they rarely mention him for Lestat. Maybe jealous, envious. Then we have Christian Slater, who played the role of the interviewer of Louis, and Daniel Molloy. And think about that, Daniel Molloy had to be played by River Phoenix, but 4 weeks before the beginning of shooting Interview with the Vampire, he tragically died. So he was replaced by a very great Christian Slater, and you will learn much more in the shocking videos I'm going to make you watch. Then we have Antonio Banderas, who played the role of the fascinating but also cruel Armand, the vampire. Then a great performance also by Stephen Rea, playing the role of Santiago, and many other actors and actresses. Think about that Interview with the Vampire. I think personally that it's not only it has become a cult movie, but it's also a masterpiece that received many nominees to the Oscar, but he didn't win even one Oscar, but it received many prizes. And do you remember the song at the end of the movie when Tom Cruise, playing the role of Lestat, is in the car? He has just vampired Daniel Molloy in the car on the on the Golden Gate of San Francisco. And there is a song. The song was by Rolling Stones. And in this case, it was the cover made by... Let me allow to introduce myself. I was around Guns N' Roses. The song is Sympathy for the Devil. And now, are you ready to watch all these forbidden, untold secrets? Yes! Let's go! I'm thirsty. Warning! Some images could disturb the sensitivity of the viewers.
We get started. So, what do you do? I'm a vampire.
I think one of...
I assume I need no introduction. Put me in my coffin.
I'll put you in your coffin!
Interview with the Vampire, 1994, directed by Neil Jordan, sunk its teeth into audiences and redefined the vampire genre for a generation. Based on Anne Rice's iconic novel, the film brought the tragic, decadent, and terrifying world of Louis, Lestat, and Claudia to life with stunning visuals and unforgettable performances. Starring Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, and a young Kirsten Dunst, the movie was a gothic horror epic that was as beautiful as it was brutal. Behind the lush costumes, intricate sets, and supernatural drama, the making of the film was a chronicle of its own, filled with casting controversies, on-set misery, and strange creative choices that fans might not know. Long history of using clever tricks to hide height differences between its stars, and Interview with the Vampire was no exception. Tom Cruise, who is about 5 feet 7 inches, was noticeably shorter than his 5 feet 11 inch co-star, Brad Pitt. To make the powerful vampire Lestat seem more physically imposing next to Louis, Cruise wore custom-made boots with significant lifts inside them to give him a few extra inches. For scenes where they walked side by side, like their stroll through the New Orleans streets, the crew would sometimes dig a small trench for Brad Pitt to walk in. It was a classic bit of movie magic to maintain the illusion of power. Child vampire, Claudia was a complex role for 11-year-old Kirsten Dunst, and it came with a significant professional milestone, her very first on-screen kiss.
The scandal kiss.
Early, you did Interview with the Vampire. You were 11, and it was your first screen... You had a screen kiss with Brad Pitt when you were 11.
I did.
The scene was with her co-star, Brad Pitt, and Dunst has since mentioned in interviews that she found the experience to be quite strange and uncomfortable. She has clarified that her reaction was purely due to her age at the time and had nothing to do with Pitt himself, whom she viewed as a protective older brother figure on set. Both actors acknowledged the inherent awkwardness of the scene, approaching it professionally to fulfill the requirements of the story. To imagine anyone but Tom Cruise as the flamboyant and menacing Lestat. But when his casting was first announced, fans, and author Anne Rice herself, were absolutely furious. Rice had famously envisioned other actors for the role, like Julian Sands or Rutger Hauer, and felt that Cruise, with his all-American hero image, was completely wrong for her vampire. She publicly declared that casting Cruise was so bizarre, and that he was no more my vampire Lestat than Edward G. Robinson is Rhett Butler. Her very public disapproval created a huge cloud over the production. However, she completely changed her mind after seeing the finished film. She was so blown away by Cruise's performance that she personally called him to apologize and wrote a 2-page ad in Variety, praising the movie and his brilliant portrayal of her beloved character.
Have you heard enough?
Tom Cruise was absolutely amazing.
Fascinating look at what could have been. In addition to fan favorite Julian Sands and an early script written for John Travolta, the studios considered a huge range of talent. Names like Jeremy Irons, John Malkovich, and Peter Weller were all on Anne Rice's personal wish list. At various points, Daniel Day-Lewis, Christopher Walken, and even Anthony Hopkins were also in consideration. Rice even suggested at one point that the studio should just swap the roles, having Brad Pitt play Lestat and Tom Cruise play the more subdued Lewis. Ultimately, Cruise's performance won everyone over, but it's fun to
The role of Daniel Malloy.
Daniel Malloy, the journalist who interviews Lewis, was originally supposed to be played by rising star River Phoenix. Tragically, Phoenix died of a drug overdose just 4 weeks before he was scheduled to begin filming his scenes. His sudden death was a shock to Hollywood and left the production scrambling to find a replacement at the last minute. The part eventually went to Christian Slater, who stepped in on short notice. In a touching gesture of respect for the late actor, Slater donated his entire salary from the film, which was $250,000, to 2 of Phoenix's favorite charities. The film is also dedicated to Phoenix, with the message "In Memory of River Phoenix, 1970 to 1993" appearing just before the end credits roll.
You followed me here, didn't you?
Most memorable scenes in the film is when Claudia tricks Lestat into drinking the blood of 2 boys she has already killed with laudanum. The dead blood paralyzes him, allowing her to slit his throat. This concept, that blood from a corpse is toxic or fatal to a vampire, became a widely accepted piece of vampire lore for many fans. The only problem is, it's not in the book.
The director, Neil Jordan.
Neil Jordan has said that the main reason he was drawn to the project was its deep, underlying theme of Catholic guilt. He saw the story not just as a horror movie, but as a wonderful parable about wallowing in guilt. For him, Lewis wasn't just a sad vampire. He was a soul in torment, constantly grappling with the sins of his immortal existence. A struggle with surreal and unsettling moments comes when the Parisian vampire Santiago, Stephen Rea, confronts Lewis in an underground tunnel. He taunts Lewis before breaking into a whimsical, gravity-defying waltz on the tunnel's curved wall and ceiling. This bizarre dance was directly inspired by a famous sequence from the 1951 Fred Astaire musical Royal Wedding, where Astaire dances on the walls and ceiling of his hotel room. To achieve the effect in both films, the filmmakers built a massive, rotating set that looked like a giant hamster wheel. As the set turned, the actor could walk up the walls, creating the illusion of defying gravity. However, attentive viewers might notice a small goof. Santiago's cape hangs normally instead of falling down towards the floor, a tiny flaw in an otherwise magical shot.
Think about that this place was really haunted.
Beautiful, sprawling estate that served as Louis de Pointe-du-Lac's home wasn't just a movie set. It's a real place called Oak Alley Plantation in Vacherie, Louisiana. And according to local legend, it's seriously haunted. The historic site has been the subject of numerous paranormal investigations and has even been featured on the TV show Ghost Hunters. Visitors and staff have reported all sorts of spooky occurrences over the years, from seeing the apparition of a slender woman with long dark hair to witnessing a candlestick fly across a room on its own during a tour. It's a fittingly creepy location for a vampire's origin story.
Here you can see Brad Pitt and Antonio Banderas. I think that this film, Interview with the Vampire, had really gorgeous actors.
While it may have been snubbed in the major acting and directing categories, Interview with the Vampire did not go unnoticed by the Academy Awards. The film received 2 Oscar nominations at the 67th Academy Awards, both recognizing its incredible craftsmanship. It was nominated for Best Art Direction for its stunning and immersive creation of 18th century New Orleans and 19th century Paris. It also received a nomination for Best Original Score for Elliot Goldenthal's haunting and operatic music. Unfortunately, it lost in both categories.
Listen what Tom Cruise revealed in this interview in 1994. Really interesting.
Were you ever close to doing any TV series or any TV guest starring roles early on?
I don't think I was that close. Actually, I remember coming out and I tested for a couple of things, and I remember some casting woman said to me, "Look, that I just wasn't gonna make it in television. That I was too intense," and she said I wasn't good looking enough, and that I said, "Well," so they shipped me back to New York at that point, you know. And then I auditioned for a picture called Taps that Harold Becker directed with Tim Hyman shot that, and I was fortunate enough to get that.
You know, a lot of people are saying that the vampire thing is a real change of pace for you, but this movie made me think a lot about Legend. You know, that kind of gothic look, monsters. Was that a project that you were really challenged by, doing Legend?
I mean, Legend, listen, I didn't know a lot about movies when I first started going out, and Ridley Scott is a master. And so I learned a lot from him in making a movie like that. I wouldn't want to make a steady diet out of making that kind of movie. And, you know, as an actor, not so much. It was more an exercise in patience, you know, and discipline than really challenging me as a performer. But I certainly learned a lot from it.
Shooting in Europe, I know you worked there before, but from the celebrity standpoint, when you're in England or France, do you detect a difference in the way people react to you when you walk on the street there?
No, not really. No. I mean, the place we were living at, it was great. We were right by a park, and you know, we'd go with Isabel. It was pretty low key in London. In Paris, you know, there's different times when you're going to promote a movie. There's a lot of excitement. There's, you know, more press and more attention. You know, a lot of times. But other times when you're just going to work, I think they kind of get tired of me and just, just leave me alone.
Well, yeah, you know, the angle everyone seems to be taking on this movie is the Anne Rice thing. About at first she wasn't happy and now she is. But was there ever a point when all this flack was flying around, did you wonder whether you could pull it off? Was there a point where you were unsure if you could, you know, do what they wanted?
Well, I think when you go to do a movie, you got to find out, you know, there's never a specific well, I guess it's never as specific in saying this is what I want. A lot of times it's you know, you have to work on a character and find it within yourself. And certainly, I felt I had a lot to offer the character, but I mean, I had no idea how far it would go or what would happen. Would it be enough? Is it too much? You know, when we're talking about the character, and, you know, there were certainly some nights where you know, there was anxiety. You know. And it all added to the excitement of making the movie. But when I first committed the picture, I was very surprised at how, you know, the controversy that came up by it. And but you know, in making the movie, and Neil was very good. You know, he was very confident in me, and he said, you know, look, he said, don't listen. You know, he'd call me every time some big slam would happen, and he'd call me and say, you just know, you know, you can play this part. You know, we'll go through this together. And he was very generous, and you know, I have a great deal of respect for him.
Okay. And
when I get to know this tragedy, I can tell you that Claudia really existed, and she was Annie Rice's daughter, this magnificent baby. Watch this, I was really shocked.
You will probably know that her first child, a daughter named Michelle, died at the age of 5 from leukemia. This became the central tragedy in Anne's life, and it would shape her first novel.
Her name was Michelle.
Been diagnosed while Anne was studying her MA, so Anne found herself struggling to find a literary voice and trying to care for a sick child. And as she said in this later interview, she would eventually find a literary voice when she turned her attention to the supernatural.
Something about the fantasy framework, the alternative reality, really freed me up to talk about the pain I was feeling. I wasn't getting anywhere with pedestrian realism, trying to talk about it. Writing a realistic story about a mother who lost her child just wasn't going to cut it. But when I went into that alternative reality, in which vampires existed and vampires could talk, somehow I was able to deal with everything I was feeling and had ever felt. And I don't know why that is. I mean, this differs so much with writers. It's almost like something you're given, not something you choose, to write in a historical framework, to write about fantasy characters, to write horror novels. You draw those cards, really. And I had to discover that that's where my real talent lay, was writing about the supernatural. And I just know I was liberated.
It felt freeing. It felt
Yeah,
safe.
it was like stepping through a door and saying, well, I can do it in this book. People will understand, you know?
Anne Rice channeled her pain into her debut novel, Interview with the Vampire. So, to summarise, if you've read the book, seen the film, or you're just dimly aware of the story, she set the story up like this. Louis, the vampire narrating the story, is essentially her, racked with Catholic guilt. Lestat, the dashing vampire, is based on her dashing husband, Stan, the poet. And the vampire Claudia is, of course, based on the child she lost. And so this strange family dynamic that you observe in the movie between the vampires Louis and Lestat and the daughter that they adopt and turn into a vampire essentially replicates Anne Rice's own family and the tragedy that nearly tore it apart. There hadn't really been a
Interview with the Vampire. Here you can see one of the horror shocking scenes.
Is told from the perspective of Louis in the form of an interview with a radio host. I guess if it was written today, Louis might have become a YouTuber or launched his own podcast or something. Anyhow, the point being, he's giving an interview, so he's describing it from his perspective, and he is a strangely sympathetic character because he's full of doubt. Louis is engaged in a futile struggle to cling on to what remains of his humanity. It's a futile struggle because he's a vampire, so his humanity is long gone. He wants to kill people, but he feels bad about doing so because he has a conscience. Anne Rice. Most of Interview with the Vampire is set in New Orleans. Anne Rice also brought the vampire's latent bisexuality to the surface. The sexual ambiguity of vampires had been hinted at in the past, but Anne Rice didn't hint. She made it really, really explicit. Her novels are very gay. I know Gen Z are all about lived experience, but Anne Rice, a heterosexual married woman, found her voice writing about homosexual activities among male vampires. So,
what? For many years, many people with closed mind didn't tell you that it was one of the most gay movies of the cinema with vampires. And instead, Annie Rice made it really explicit. But what's wrong in it? I don't understand. I want to stress that I'm against all prejudices and I'm against all discriminations.
Don't forget, in the 1980s, the goth scene really got underway, becoming one of the most enduring subcultures of them all. Anne Rice's vampire novels just so happen to fit in with that scene perfectly. It's really quite surprising that a film version of Interview with the Vampire hadn't been made at some point in the late 70s or in the 1980s. Anne Rice had sold the rights to Paramount for $250,000, which was not a bad deal for an unknown author to get in 1976. Various writers tried their luck with the script, including Anne Rice herself, but the project seemed to haunt Paramount Studios throughout the 1980s. It just never really got anywhere. In this 1988 interview with the Miami Herald, Anne Rice pointed out that the queer aspects of the story may have been a turn-off for the powers that be in Hollywood. And this is the point at which Cher enters the chat. In the Miami Herald interview, Anne Rice had this to say: "I'd be very happy if Cher played Louis as a transvestite woman. I'm serious. Nobody in Hollywood is going to make a love story about two men. I've already been told that. So what I came up with is a solution that struck me as plausible. Louis is me, so in the screen treatment, I make Louis a woman. The woman I'd like to be, you know, a 6-foot-tall transvestite." Well, I mean, it could have happened. Cher has cited Interview with the Vampire as one of her favourite books on numerous occasions, and she...
Here you can see Tom Cruise on the cover of Vanity Fair, October 1994. Because, watch this.
Appeared on the cover of the October 1994 edition of Vanity Fair. The interview coincided with the release of the film. In that interview, Tom Cruise was asked about the gay rumours and issued a formal denial, and he insisted that his marriage to Nicole Kidman was very much a real relationship. Either way, the rumours would pursue him for many years to come. It was ironic that Tom Cruise was having to deny the gay rumours as he was promoting Interview with the Vampire, by far the gayest film he ever made. Check out this scene where Lestat kills Louis. I mean, the sexual tension is real. And let's not forget 1994 right here, where Lestat seduces a young guy and he's obviously going to kill him and drink his blood. He's hoping that Louis is going to do the same.
Interview with the Vampire wasn't just a movie, it was a battlefield. Tom Cruise battled public hatred, Brad Pitt battled depression, and Anne Rice, well, she battled everyone until she saw the final cut and had to eat her words in a 2-page apology ad. This is the true story behind one of the most controversial productions in Hollywood history. Power, Cruise received a record $10 million salary and a percentage of the profits. This was an enormous payday for 1994. He was by far the highest paid person on the production, and his involvement is what got the film greenlit after nearly
And this is a very shocking curiosity.
Playing vampires were required to hang upside down for up to 30 minutes at a time during makeup. This would force all the blood in their bodies to rush to their heads, causing the blood vessels in their faces to bulge. The makeup artist would then trace over the swollen veins, creating the eerie, translucent-skinned look. Unfortunately for the actors, they would have to repeat the process several times over, as the blood would quickly drain from their heads. Talk about suffering for your art.
Tom Cruise
Famously complained during filming that Brad Pitt practiced poor hygiene, which led to overwhelming body odor. Given how close they had to be during intimate vampire scenes, this must have made things incredibly awkward on set. Released in September 2011, Brad Pitt revealed that he had a miserable experience while making this film. He complained of discomfort while wearing his costumes and colored contacts and being forced to play second fiddle to Tom Cruise both on screen and off. When asked about what it was like working on the movie at the time, he told the Times-Picayune, "I am miserable. 6 months in the dark. Almost every scene took place at night."
Shocking!
Shocking scenes is when Claudia slits Lestat's throat and he crawls around while his blood spills everywhere. The scene was achieved by transferring from Tom Cruise bleeding from a prosthetic wound to an animatronic model designed to wither as it bled out, enhanced with CGI blood. Instead of Cruise, it was an animatronic created by special effects wizard Stan Winston, who did the special effects and makeup for the movie. Practical effects at their finest.
20 minutes had been cut from the movie.
An interview with the vampire was shown to test audiences who, according to producer David Geffen, felt there was a little too much blood and violence. Eventually, about 20 minutes worth of footage was either cut or rearranged before the theatrical version was ready. Imagine how much more violent the original cut must have been.
Think about that Tom Cruise and Antonio Banderas never met while filming Interview with the Vampire.
Only factors into Louis and Claudia's journey when they moved to Paris. Banderas never met Cruise during the actual filming. The two biggest male stars in the movie never actually worked together on set.
This was
LGBT-related film to gross more than $100 million at the U.S. box office. Worldwide, it's the #2 gay film of all time, followed only by The Birdcage. The film's queer subtext was revolutionary for mainstream Hollywood in 1994. Interview with the Vampire survived development hell, a tragic death, a miserable leading man, and an author's public fury to become a $223 million phenomenon.
Moderato. Potable, perhaps.
If you made it this far, you're...
the movie
follows a reporter named Daniel, who meets a man claiming to be a vampire named Louis who wants to tell his story. He begins with his wife and child dying in childbirth, and his wanting to join them in death after. When he is about to be killed, he's rescued by a vampire named Lestat, who gives him the choice of death or living in undeath as a vampire. Louis decides to become a vampire, and then continues the story of how Lestat was cruel and loved killing humans for his food, even though animals would suffice. Louis struggles with what he has become, even as time marches on. They turn a young girl named Claudia, whose mother has died of plague and will probably die herself anyway. The three move around as the years pass, but Claudia gets upset that she ages emotionally but stays in a child's body. She tricks and kills Lestat, or so she thinks, until he comes back in a weakened state. He is still older and stronger than both of them, but is lit on fire and they think he's finally gone. They search many places across the globe for vampires like them, but find nothing until Armand finds them and introduces them to his coven of creatures like them. They find out that Claudia and Louis killed Lestat, and that vampires killing other vampires is a crime punishable by death. The group puts Claudia and her new mother, a human who can't get past her daughter dying and agrees to become a vampire to be with Claudia, into a cell that has sunlight come down and burn them to death. Louis is put in a coffin and is to remain until he wastes away but is rescued by Armand. Louis kills the entire coven except Armand, whom he leaves as he could never be with someone who allowed the death of Claudia. Louis walks the world alone until he returns to New Orleans in the late 80s, where he finds Lestat still alive and feeding off of rats. He leaves him and concludes his story with Daniel, who wants to be a vampire himself. He soon gets the option when a reinvigorated Lestat attacks him and gives him the same choice he offered Louis a couple hundred years prior. The movie was a smash hit that earned 2 Oscar nominations and $223 million on its $60 million budget.
This movie was the return of Gothic horror.
As all of these titles tried to capture the same hammer magic that was around from the late 50s to the late 60s. Another surprising sign of the times, at least for successful movies, was the deft usage of CGI. While CGI has always, and will always be imperfect, It's about how and when you use it and who is in charge. Stan Winston handled the practical effects, which of course looked amazing, but what little CGI is used here looks good and not out of place at all. The final sign of the times is Brad Pitt. The dude feels like he's been around forever, but this is when he was making movies in droves. He had 3 movies in 1990, 2 in 91, 3 in 92, 3 in 93, and 3 in 94.
I really couldn't go to the
There's a lot of blood.
Yes, there's a lot of blood, and there are also scenes that don't use it or require it, like when they explain that Claudia and Lestat killed an entire family and we don't see it happen. Only the coffins being taken out of the house. Speaking of coffins, they change how vampires work here, and it's good stuff. Louis jokes about how he likes looking at crosses, and that stakes are a silly notion. Coffins and avoiding sunlight are a necessity, however, as we see with the deaths of some of the characters. As good as most of the cast is, Dunst stands out. This wasn't her first role, as she had done some TV at this point and was in Mega Bomb, The Bonfire of the Vanities. But this was a big deal and a huge contrast to her other 1994 role in Little Women. Her anger and emotions as a woman trapped in a child's body are great, and you can really see her evolve when she is more taken care of by Louis than Lestat. Lestat makes her into a serial killer, while Louis tends to ground her and help her find what she needs, not what she wants. She even uses this malice that Lestat imbues upon her when she decides that his death is the only way she can be free. There is a coldness to it that is matched by her genuine fear when she is about to die.
And now, let's delve deeper into the plot.
Louis starting his life story in 1791 as a rich plantation owner in Louisiana, recently bereft of his loved ones, wandering through his miserable life hoping someone would kill him and end his suffering. A vampire by the name of Lestat granting his wish and taking his life, but offering him a new immortal unlife in exchange. Louis accepting in a combination of fear of death and hope that existence as a vampire would be less miserable for him. Spoiler warning, it wasn't. It was so much worse. Watching his last sunrise before his transformation, and the process of turning a human into a vampire involving draining the human's blood, then feeding him the cursed vampiric blood flowing from one's own body. Louis becoming overwhelmed with the stunning beauty of the world as seen through his new enhanced vampire perceptions. Whoa, hey, why did that statue open its eyes? That's just weird. The revelation that despite most folklore concerning vampires being pure poppycock, they do apparently need to sleep in coffins at night. Louis not taking to life as a vampire very easily, as he's initially horrified by the idea of killing people, something that Lestat positively delights in, killing 2 to 3 innocents a night. Lestat's advice concerning drinking the blood of rats as a last resort if human victims are not available, one of the very few useful things he taught Louis about life as an immortal. Louis's African slaves becoming convinced that there is some straight up bad shit going on in the manor house and coming to the edge of full revolt and riot. Louis eventually going mad with the horror of his existence and burning his own home down. After traveling to New Orleans, Louis realizing that killing humans, despite still being abhorrent to him, somehow gives him a passing emotional respite from the pain of his existence, so easing up on his strict diet. The scene where Lestat sadistically plays with the escorts before killing them is in slightly the wrong place in the story, but it's very accurate in the details and almost word for word in the dialogue. Louis going for a walk and finding a girl desperately clinging to the corpse of her mother, recently deceased from an outbreak of plague and being unable to resist his desire to feed on her. Lestat bursting in on them, elated that Louis is on the killing train now and morbidly dancing with the body of the girl's mother, before bringing the child back to their place to turn her into a vampire in a manipulative move to give Louis someone to love and keep him from leaving their new family. Yeah, it's basically the classic, well, maybe having a child together will fix this relationship in both the book and the film, and it has equally toxic and terrible results in both as it does in real life. Claudia, as he named the girl, almost over-draining Lestat's blood during the conversion process. The montage of the two of them being daddies to their little girl. You know, I kind of regret phrasing it like that, but I guess I'm committed now. Claudia taking to killing a lot more naturally than Louis ever did, luring her victims in by pretending to be a lost, helpless child, sleeping in Louis's coffin with him. Claudia eventually turning bitter towards her daddies, and Lestat in particular, because she is sick of being a child forever and resentful of them for turning her at such a young age. Louis confessing that while it was Lestat who fed her his blood, completing the process, it was he, her more gentle and loving father, who had fed on her, dooming her to die in the first place. Though, to be fair, her lifespan as an orphan living in the plague-decimated part of the city was probably never an optimistic one. Claudia stating that she hates both her daddies for it, but only avenging herself on the crueler of the two, tricking Lestat into drinking poison blood, then cutting his throat and press-ganging Louis into helping her dump his now shriveled body in the swamp. Louis and Claudia preparing to leave America in search of other vampires who could possibly explain the meaning of their existence to them, but finding to their horror that Lestat was only mostly dead. The fight between them and the resulting fire that appears to kill Lestat for the second time. Louis and Claudia making making it to their transatlantic boat, which was unfortunately, at least for the other passengers, unusually rat-free. The two of them travelling around looking for their kin until they eventually find them as Louis is approached by a vampire in Paris who makes a rather unusual introduction by mirroring his movements perfectly and acting like a bit of a buffoon. A less silly vampire by the name of Armand giving him a card inviting him to the theatre. The establishment turning out to be run by vampires pretending to be humans pretending to be vampires, though I will mention that the book didn't feel the need to spell this out in as many words like the film did. The vampire performers killing and feeding on a poor terrified girl on stage while none of the human audience noticed her death was not an act. Getting invited into the theatre's catacombs, which apparently it has, and meeting the little vampire society within. Armand having a human servant boy who willingly let vampires feed on him. Louis being deeply disappointed when Armand confirms that he is the oldest vampire that he knows of, but he is aware of no complex history of their people or greater meaning to their vampiric existence. Despite this, there is an instant, overwhelming connection formed between Armand and Louis. Armand deeply desiring some sort of relationship with Louis because he senses that, still sympathetic to humans and loved ones, Louis could break him out of the apathetic funk he'd fallen into over the last few centuries, and Louis seeing in Armand the vampire senpai he never had in Lestat. Armand casually mentioning to them that the only crime that he and his vampire friends would consider punishable is the act of a vampire killing another vampire in a sort of, we know what you did last summer, Claudia way. Claudia, aware of their new bond and that Louis would probably be better off with Armand, but not wanting to be left all alone in the world, brings a woman called Magdalene home and demands that Louis turn her so she can be her replacement companion. Magdalene, having recently lost her real daughter, is all for this pairing, so Louis unenthusiastically complies. Her being a very short-lived vampire due to Armand's acting troupe bursting in and grabbing her and Claudia, sentencing the latter to death for killing Lestat, and I guess dooming the former for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Louis being convinced that his new best friend Armand would not allow this, but being wrong. Louis getting locked in an iron coffin, then bricked up underground, eventually being rescued by Armand, but too late to save his beloved Claudia from getting exposed to sunlight. Louis getting revenge on them by burning the theatre to the ground and slicing the survivors to bits with a scythe. The scythe was a prop from the theatre, he wasn't just being really dramatic. Armand, now alone in the world, not attempting revenge on Louis because he knew his friends really had it coming and still desperately wanting to be with him and making a pitch for it at the Louvre Art Gallery. Many, many years later, Louis coming across Lestat, surprisingly not dead once again, but a shadow of his former self, wrecked by not having Louis to look after him and his inability to adjust to the changing times around him. Upon the conclusion of the tale, the journalist, apparently missing the point of the whole story, demanding that Louis turn him into a vampire so he can be all cool and superpowered too, forcing Louis to go all hardcore.
There are several differences between the novel by Anne Rice and the movie, but above all, in the ending.
Deviation from the book is the ending of the story, whereas in the film Louis scares the shit out of Christian Slater but lets him go, only for him to be immediately attacked and possibly turned by a miraculously recovered Lestat. In the book, Louis said, fuck it, and fed on his new journalist friend himself when he just wouldn't shut the fuck up about wanting to be a vampire. Thoroughly drained of blood, the boy asked if he would die, to which a disinterested Louis responded that he didn't know before leaving him there. Fortunately he did not, but when he came to the next morning he realised that he might have a second shot at immortality, as Louis had mentioned the address that Lestat had shut himself up inside to waste away in forever, and the book ends on him presumably setting out to find him.
The scene I'm going to make you watch is considered one of the bloodiest and shocking scene of Interview with a Vampire. This one. Does the film Interview with a Vampire end? These are the most most incredible scenes in the ending. We are in the Golden Gate of San Francisco. And
at that age, the master of a large plantation just south of New Orleans. I had lost my wife in childbirth. I assume I need no introduction. Release from the pain of living. Oh, Louis is open to it. Still, have you heard enough? But it wasn't. I've had to listen to that.